Just a rambling man. Ain't got a dime. Just a rambling man. Ain't got a dime. There it is. Been on this here road such a long, long time. Got the shirt on my back. Got my old backpack. Got my open boot, my favorite flute in my hat. When I was young, I left my home. Been on this here road such a long, long time. Ain't got a dime.
Yeah, that Dimitri guy, he's pretty cool.
Ain't got a dime.
Oh yeah, Dimitri, yeah, he's a pretty cool guy. I like that Dimitri. Yeah, old Diamant Ray, yeah, he's pretty good. He used to come down on the ranch and hunt every fall. I like Dimitri. Dimitri! I ain't never heard of Dimitri. I just listen to Riot. I never heard of Dimitri. I know Damn It Ray though.
This week, national emergency declared by the president. A lot of controversy going on about it. They revisited this law back in 1970. It had been going on in the past. They kind of set down some regulations for it in the 70s. And that's what we're governed by now. From everything I could see and reading about this piece of legislation, there's no standard for declaring a national emergency. This all becomes, excuse me, subjective. From the president's point of view to the Congress's point of view, it's subjective. The president has a hangnail and he feels it's a national emergency. He could declare it a national emergency. It would not violate this particular part of the law. Excuse me. He then has access to around 130 some powers, things he could use to solve the situation with. And he must declare those, what he intends to use to carry out the national emergency. If Congress disagrees with this, they have recourse. A 2/3 vote in the House and Senate can stop the national emergency. From Congress' point of view, it's subjective also whether the Congress feels it's a national emergency or not. So anybody out there trying to tell you it's not an emergency might not be to them, but if the president declares it a national emergency, it is a national emergency until he says it's not, or Congress says it's not, or he doesn't renew it on a yearly basis as set up in the amendment that they, or it's not an amendment, the legislation passed by the Congress. And it's still not a big deal to get excited about, because even if the Congress can't get the votes, it's not a very difficult issue to take to the court, which they've already planned on. We all expected it. This is how our government works. There are areas in law and government that may not be clear. I've heard people on this issue right here, for and against. Both have good arguments. So this is where our use of the Supreme Court, this is what the Supreme Court's for. These issues then will go before the court, and the court will decide their constitutionality. Is it within the framework of the Constitution? This will bring up another subject, which is why it's real important to have what we consider, when we say conservative judges, we simply mean that a judge that reads the Constitution for what it is, not what it's not. You'll see this. This is an issue that's been in our country from basically day one. Notice how I segued into the Supreme Court and Constitution. Wasn't that good? Now we get a history lesson. The Federalist Party, with Alexander Hamilton under President Washington, he was the first Secretary of Treasury. Hamilton and his associates, typically urban bankers and businessmen, then formed the Federalist Party to promote their shared political ideas. Federalists believed in a centralized national government with strong fiscal roots. In addition, the Federalists felt, listen real close here, you're going to recognize this, that the Constitution was open for interpretation. In other words, Federalists believed there were unmentioned rights belonging to the federal government, and therefore the government had the right to adopt additional powers. Who's that sound like today? Jefferson, on the other hand, had a little bit different view. They looked at the Constitution as a strict document that clearly limited the powers of the federal government. Unlike the Federalist Party, at that time it was Democrat and Republicans. Democrats actually used to believe this. Contended that the government did not have the right to adopt additional powers to fulfill its duties under the Constitution. In other words, from their point of view, if the power was not given to the federal government explicitly in the Constitution, that power then went to the states. This was the check and balance between state and federal, so that you did not get an overpowering federal government, which many of the founding fathers were worried about. Kept the states alive, gave states some power to check the federal government. So, the judges on the Supreme Court, when we say conservative, what we're talking about are the ones that look at it like Jefferson, that, here's what it's written, here's what it says, here's what it doesn't say, and what it doesn't say we can't rule on, But what it does say, we can. Where this Constitution is silent, if you want to put something else in there, then you have to amend the Constitution. You don't just make and decide a new law. Now, on the other side of that, what we would consider liberal judges, they read in between the lines. Well, it doesn't say we can't, and over here it says this, and if we kind of put that together, it doesn't really say you can't, so, whatever you want. Make a law, go for it. Bottom line, if you now here's my worry. I'm sure the national security issue or emergency is going to end up in the Supreme Court. I doubt that they're going to get 2/3 in both houses for the Congress to reject this national security. So I'm pretty sure it's going to end up in the Supreme Court. I think if the national security law was probably in and of itself brought under the scrutiny of the Supreme Court, it would probably fail muster and would be deemed unconstitutional itself. I don't think that's exactly what they're going to be looking at. I think the court will be looking more at what the laws that the Congress has put on the books about this issue, what exact powers do they give the president, and can he do what he's wanting to do or not? Does it violate the current national security emergency law? And that's hard to tell. That's going to take a bigger brain than mine. That's why we have Supreme Court justices that spend their life studying the Constitution and trying to interpret it properly. We do fortunately have a fairly strong conservative court today, so if they rule against us, I'm probably going to have to go with them. Although sometimes Chief Justice John Roberts seems to give me a little bit of concern. But other than that, that's where we're at. It's going to be a good story. They're going to raise all sorts of stuff about dictatorship and all this good stuff. We're not even close to that. We still have the three powers: legislative, executive, and judicial. Not the House, the Senate, and the President like some people think. So remember this as you watch the news this week. Realize that it's just a bunch of hoopla. The system will work. It will come to a decision one way or the other. Whether you're conservative or Republican or liberal, I think in the end you're going to just need to learn to accept the Supreme Court ruling, just like we do in everything else. Well, I hope I've helped you out and given you a little knowledge you may not have had before. Have a nice day.